The Gulf of Maine offers an amazing diversity of delectable seafood. Mackerel, whiting, pollock, redfish, monkfish, tuna, the list is vast. Yet, too often many of these species are not valued and either remain unharvested or enter low-value, even bait markets. Meanwhile, there's a massive audience of buyers who crave these products and will pay big money for them. This tutorial is for commercial fishermen who wish to harness these high-end markets by focusing on low volumes of top-quality seafood, making the most of every pound they catch. This video has 5 parts. Part 1. The market for top-quality seafood. Part 2. Working with buyers. Part 3. On-board quality handling. Part 4. The Ikejime fish kill method. Part 5. Packaging and distribution. All right, let's get started. Throughout this tutorial, we'll be referring to sashimi grade seafood. The term sashimi means thinly sliced raw meat or fish, typically in a Japanese restaurant setting. While there are no official standards for sashimi grade, it generally means suitable to be eaten raw. For chefs and retailers, sashimi grade is synonymous with top quality and freshness. Sushi is hugely popular in the U.S. and demand continues to grow. There are approximately 20,000 sushi restaurants in the country with annual revenue from sushi estimated around $2.25 billion. The supermarket sushi market is approaching $2 billion. Here in New England, sushi restaurant sales topped $71 million in 2014. Unfortunately for local fishermen, almost all of the seafood used in sushi is imported from Japan, mainly because of their strict quality handling practices. The demand for well-handled sashimi-grade seafood goes beyond just sushi restaurants. Chefs from high-end restaurants and retailers are also interested in high-quality product. Not only does it taste and look better, quality seafood lasts longer. In other words, it has a longer shelf life, which reduces costs and waste from product that must be thrown away. Also driving the demand for sashimi-grade products are ceviche and crudo preparations, as well as the new poke trend, a Hawaiian dish of cubed raw fish. For fishermen who want to tap into these high-end markets, the good news is that there is intense interest in top-quality local seafood, including interest in seeing more local species in sushi dishes. In our recent market research study, we found that customers were willing to pay a 20 to 40% premium for local Gulf of Maine product over traditional imported seafood offerings. Careful handling onboard commercial fishing vessels requires more time, more ice, and more hold space. This also means that fishermen likely harvest less volume than they have in the past. To make it worthwhile, it's important that they are working with the right markets that will compensate them appropriately. Depending on the species, high-quality, well-handled seafood can earn a premium between 20 and 100%. Similarly, fish that has been handled using the Ikejime method can earn a 50 to 200% price premium. High-end markets, particularly top chefs, seek whole fish and adjust their purchases based on what is seasonally available. Regionally local products that receive little recognition in the traditional marketplace are of great interest to high-end buyers. These include mackerel, whiting, pollock, redfish, and herring, in addition to cod, monkfish, and flounder. They are also interested in the whole fish and fish parts, including heads, cheeks, livers, and skin. There is always a market for high-quality fish, regardless of the species. The first step in harnessing high-end markets is connecting with one or more buyers who will compensate you well for your well-handled seafood. Find out which species they are interested in. Ask them what their product specifications are, for example, whether they want whole product, gutted, and so on, as well as how much product they would purchase and at what price. Finally, learn what their quality requirements are and discuss handling requirements, including whether the fish should be bled and/or gutted and/or killed using the ikejime method, which is explained later. Once you find out what your buyer is looking for, consider what makes the most sense for your business and what you can integrate into your current operation. The number one requirement of high-end buyers is product consistency. They have very little patience for perfection one day followed by subpar product the next. Inconsistency is a very fast way to lose customers. Chefs and buyers will carefully evaluate each fish to determine quality. They will run their fingers over the fish to feel for bruising or soft spots. They will look for missing scales or missing eyes, fins, cuts, and net marks. There are some important food safety considerations to keep in mind when selling your seafood, particularly if it is intended for raw consumption. Legally, all seafood handling must comply with fisheries HACCP and good manufacturing practices during processing. HACCP stands for Hazardous Analysis and Critical Control Points. A HACCP plan is a food safety management system that controls for potential hazards such as biological or physical contamination. Essentially, it helps ensure that food is safe for consumption. In addition to HACCP and good manufacturing practices, seafood is also subject to the sanitary transport rule during shipping. The FDA enforces all of these laws. To sell fish intended for raw consumption, there are 3 basic requirements. 1. The fish must be frozen to kill parasites. 2. It must be produced in clean conditions that control for listeria. And 3. It must be harvested in a way that ensures that drugs and chemicals are not part of the flesh. In addition to the legal standards, some buyers demand additional requirements, including that fish must be frozen to -60 degrees Celsius versus the -35 degrees Celsius that the law requires. Many believe this produces a superior product. Also, most buyers require an audited food safety plan that covers all of the HACCP and good manufacturing practice requirements from the FDA, as well as further requirements around specifications, traceability, training, and more. Asking for feedback from your buyers is a great way to improve your handling practices and ensure you and your buyers are on the same page. Open communication is key to developing a successful working relationship. Selling to any of these high-end markets will require making changes to how you fish, including slowing down all or parts of your current fishing operation, handling each fish gently, and upgrading your on-boat handling. It may also require different onshore handling and transportation methods than what you may be currently using. In most cases, not every part of your catch will end up making it to the high-end sashimi markets, but adopting these techniques will improve the overall quality of your catch. Achieving high-quality product is possible using all gear types. Jig-caught fish generally yields the highest quality fish with minimal bruising or damage. Still, it's possible, with a few adaptations, to accomplish top-quality fish using gill net and trawl gear. When gill netting, shorter soaks will yield higher quality product. For example, soaking nets for just 1 to 2 hours and never overnight will ensure that fish do not spend time struggling or becoming damaged from the nets. Also, careful handling out of the net will improve the quality of the fish. In fact, some fishermen will snip the net to avoid bruising the fish or tearing off scales. Similarly, with trawl gear, shorter tows will help minimize damage. Try cutting the towing time in half. These shorter tows will decrease the amount of time fish will spend struggling in the net, improving their condition when they get on board. Also, a lower volume of fish in the cod end will prevent the fish from being crushed or bruised. If you are using a cod end catch sensor, try placing it lower on the cod end where it will alert you when smaller volumes of fish fill the bag. Once on board, be careful not to allow the fish to drop onto hard surfaces, which will cause bruising. Never gaff your fish or create unnecessary punctures that allow bacterial growth and accelerated breakdown. Select fish for your high-end customers based on the species, size, and condition. The next step is to bleed the fish. Bleed the fish by making cuts near the gills and at the tail. These two cuts help the blood flow more quickly out of the body. Be sure not to sever any part of the body, including the tail. This cut should go through the spinal cord. Next, place the fish in a slurry ice mixture to bleed. Once the fish has had the chance to bleed out, move the fish into a clean ice slurry. When preparing slurry totes for bleeding and icing the fish, it's important to keep a few things in mind. First, you will need to prepare 2 totes, one for bleeding and another for chilling. For both totes, it's crucial to maintain an appropriate salt-to-water ratio. About 3% is ideal. Most fishermen use seawater when preparing their totes, which naturally has around 3 to 3.5% salt ratio. Exceeding this ratio will cause the fish to freeze and could damage the flesh. Also be mindful not to add too much ice that it could crush the fish and meat. The bleeding tote is for fish that have recently been cut as described in section 3. The second tote is used for chilling the fish that has already been bled. Water that is mixed with blood prevents the fish from chilling efficiently. Therefore, it's best to not leave fish in the bleeding tote for more than 2 to 3 hours. This second tote should have clean water and slightly more ice than the tote used for bleeding. The key is to have enough water to allow the fish to float evenly. Stirring the tote occasionally will help all the fish reach an even core temperature. Ideally, fish should remain in this chilling tote for 3 to 6 hours. In some fish, removing them too early will cause the fish to absorb water and harm the texture of the flesh. On the other hand, if the fish is left to chill for too long, it could start to freeze. Once the fish have reached the core temperature of 32 degrees Fahrenheit, you can remove them from the chilling tote and place them in ice in a smaller tote for transportation. As always, work with your buyer to learn of any additional requirements. Ikejime is a Japanese fish kill method that paralyzes a fish to preserve meat quality. Depending on what your markets and buyers want and what you catch, the Ikejime fish kill method can add a lot of value to the top of your catch. This might represent 10% of your catch. The Ikejime process involves paralyzing the fish by destroying its brain and spinal cord to stop further stress and movement. This prevents the buildup of lactic acid in the flesh, which affects the quality and taste of the meat. It also slows down decomposition by delaying the onset of rigor mortis. As a result, fish that has been killed using the Ikejime method can increase the sashimi grade quality shelf life from 1 day to 5 days. Once on board, lay the fish on a flat surface and using a sharp knife, spike the brain. This will paralyze the fish, preventing it from moving and struggling. Next, bleed the fish as described in section 3. Now allow the fish time to bleed as described in section 3. The final step in the process is spinal cord destruction. In this step, you run a thin wire down the spinal column to destroy the nervous system. Aim the wire for the small hole right above the spine. If the fish shakes or shimmies as you push the wire down, you know that you have found the right spot. Run the wire down the entire length of the spinal column. Depending on the fish or visibility of the spinal column, you can run the wire from the tail or head end. Either way, make sure to run the wire just once and avoid moving it repeatedly. With practice, this step will become easier and faster. There are variations and preferences to this process, which is why it is important to talk to your buyer about their preferred specifications. After taking such great care of your product, it's important to make sure to package it well. First, rather than fitting your fish to the box, be sure to fit the box to your fish. The key is to not bend the fish to fit the box or to overfill the box with too many fish or too much ice. Find a box that will put your fish on display. Remember not to place ice directly onto the fish or package it in a way where the ice can melt onto the fish. The water from the melting ice will cause the fish to degrade and should be avoided at all costs. Also, use a protective plastic sheet to prevent the ice from dinging or bruising the fish. Some dealers use a green colored paper to protect the fish and differentiate it as a high-quality product. Once you've packaged your product, work with your offloading partner or purveyor to ensure your product is properly handled during transit. Make sure that your product is kept at the appropriate temperatures throughout the shipping process and that they maintain the cold chain. Also, ensure that your product is carefully handled and not crushed or thrown. Getting into these markets won't happen overnight, but with careful planning, attention to detail, and consistency, these markets have the potential to raise the profile of Gulf of Maine seafood and your profitability.